Welcome. This is Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. My name is Lawrence Pugliese, and today's guest is Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot, IHM. And that's all. That's all we need. Sister Mary Alice. We'll be talking to her about a bunch of things today. But first, a little something for you. This is called Hello Rose. The sanguine nature of these soulful pursuits I cherish because no one can be found in cahoots. The darling derrieres and strong lilting stares only intensify the pulmonary flow. As such a stirring sight, to some a bit contrite, but to me a whirlwind of inspiring soul. How from here to there can one get it to go? The generous and trusting, the contemptful and manipulative disgusting, are an opportunity for a vision of yin-yang, streams of wisdom far from falling below. As the earnest talk compels and provokes the flock, a note is passed from hand to hand behind our backs in the dark room of the lemonade stand, overshadowing memories of Little League and cheer. And we continue to rock, and we continue to roll. We continue to gather no moss in the depths of our searching souls. The leaders and lovers and chronic acting doublers keep steady and firm with all messages designed for one to discern that everything is okay, except for the news of dismay, chronicling a system's chaotic demise. Who is wise? And then it is stated, those are just ne'er-do-well folks who won't allow themselves to embrace and sympathize. Harmonize and forget about it. It's all good. It is what it is, Liz. So the story goes. How blatantly apropos. You scratch your backside and wipe that tear from your nose. Again, welcome to Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. I want to remind all of you that we have underwriting this program, this episode, United Cultures Leadership Institute at Lackawanna College. Check our site out on Facebook, United Cultures Leadership Institute, type in. And again, I'm very excited to say we have Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot, the Executive Director of the Friends of the Poor, here at the table to talk with us today about a lot of interesting ideas and a lot of provocative questions I'll be throwing at her. I'm used to doing this because she is part of the advisory board of United Cultures Leadership Institute. You've so far heard from Owen Bailey and Dr. Leah Palmater, two other really important aspects, mindsets on UCLI's board. Here's another, Sister Mary Alice.
Thank you, Larry.
Oh, it's a pleasure
Glad
having
to
you.
be here.
Oh, it's good to have you on this hot day.
Yes.
Hot April day. Well, I think the first thing, well, probably one of the biggest things, is the fact that you are part of the IHM, Immaculate Hearts of Mary. Mm-hmm. So why don't we talk to the folks a little bit about that organization? What would you say its mission, its philosophy is?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. Before I begin that, though, I do want to mention about the UCLI. It has great potential, and I'm excited to see that unfold. But I also am grateful because it's created an opportunity for us to meet.
Yeah.
And although we both grew up in Lackawanna County and probably are friends of friends, we never got to meet each other until this. So, and I think that's true of a lot of community initiatives. You go at it for the cause, and then you realize you're meeting a lot of great people. And I think that's true of the cadets as well, the young people that are in the organization.
I agree with you.
Yeah. It's been nice to meet them.
Yeah, they're inspiring.
Yeah.
8th graders. It's amazing how much they can inspire.
Mm-hmm. They have great ideas.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah. So I'm always glad to talk about the IHM congregation. I think that people in northeastern Pennsylvania think of us because of the work that we do. And we have been in this diocese since the 1850s. Our congregation was started in 1845 in Monroe, Michigan by a woman named Teresa Maxis Duchemin. She is a woman who was of mixed race. She was Haitian and British, born in Baltimore in 1810. So we do celebrate her, the 200th anniversary of her birth, which is pretty impressive. But you can imagine being born in 1810 in Baltimore of mixed race, that there were many challenges for her. She then became a sister in another order, Oblate Sisters of Providence, and they still continue to minister in the Baltimore area. And they're predominantly a congregation of black women, black Catholic women, and they continue to do ministry and serve a great need in that area, as well as around the world. But Teresa Maxis was particularly interested in beginning a congregation that would be primarily educators. And also Teresa had within her some of the French culture from being Haitian.
Right.
And so she felt the call to go to Monroe, Michigan. She was invited by a Redemptorist priest. And that's significant because the Redemptorist charism follows the spirituality of St. Alphonsus Liguori. And his was very much about reaching the abandoned souls. And I think that still continues to be part of the IHM congregation in Scranton, part of our mission. Many sisters in the congregation are still very active in the education ministry, and yet there's also, in that capacity, in the same setting as teaching, there's that desire to reach out to the abandoned poor. And that was something that Teresa picked up from St. Alphonsus and gave to our congregation. From Monroe, Michigan, she followed back to this East Coast. She came to Susquehanna, Pennsylvania. And at one time, this whole region of Pennsylvania was part of the Philadelphia Diocese. So at one point in the 1860s, there was a division, and this became the Scranton Diocese and the Philadelphia Diocese. And I share that information because we have three branches of the IHM congregation: Monroe, Michigan, which was the original; Philadelphia, which is in Immaculata, Pennsylvania; and Scranton. And so we have an IHM Scranton Mother House here adjacent to Mary Woods campus.
And those are the only three locations?
Those are the only three.
Wow.
So Teresa Maxis started all of that. A woman with great obstacles when you consider being of mixed race and being Catholic in Baltimore.
In the 1800s?
In the 1800s, yeah. And even that she traveled from Baltimore to the Midwest pre 1860s, so that was quite a challenge for her.
Yeah, slavery was still
absolutely
existent.
Yeah. So when the IHM congregation, I think, is best known in Scranton, as I said, for some of the ministries that we have: Marywood University, St. Joseph Center, Marion Community Hospital in Carbondale. The congregation also sponsors ministries outside of the area: a Montessori school in Long Island, co-sponsors Mother Seton Academy in Baltimore, and then, of course, is the sponsor, considered the sponsor, which is a legal and governance relationship between the congregation, that ministry, and with accountability to the Vatican. And so the congregation sponsors Friends of the Poor, the ministry that I now have the honor of serving as its director.
And it was founded by?
It was founded by Sister Adrienne.
She's an IHM?
She also is an IHM sister, right? She began that ministry in 1984.
Wow.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah, the congregation obviously has a great role in the Scranton Diocese. Many sisters are from the local area, although we are spread out throughout the, primarily the East Coast. We have a mission in Peru, and a strong presence, obviously, in the New York, Baltimore, and continue to Florida. Many sisters still serve as teachers, and others are involved with parish work and health care and social service agencies. So a lot of variety among us.
When you say abandoned souls, that mainly equates to the poor?
That was Alphonsus's term. He wanted to go. He was a priest in Rome. He wanted to extend himself to not just stay in the culture that was so Catholic, but to also go out to the culture that was desirous of exploring spirituality, and they were often people who were in more rural settings. And so I think that's why the congregation is not strictly in Scranton. We extend ourselves into other regions. And this idea of poor, sometimes the forgotten, the idea of abandoned poor, those who might be forgotten, people who sometimes fall through the cracks,
Right.
that idea.
And when you look at the whole organization, as you mentioned, there's a significant presence in Michigan,
Yeah.
in Scranton, and in Philadelphia. What person or what collective is at the pinnacle of this organization? I mean, besides the Vatican,
Right.
is there a one person who's in charge of all those three important
No.
entities?
Each of the entities, each of the branches, we have our own elected leadership. And so we have a sister who would be elected by the members to serve as president for a term of 4 years. She's assisted by members of her leadership team, other sisters who would be responsible for certain areas of the administration of the congregation. So each of those three branches has their own administration.
So who is the chief person, I guess you could say,
For
Scranton?
the Scranton branch, her name is Sister Mary Persico, and she has served 2 terms. She'll be completing her 2 terms this year. And so we're in the process of discerning God's will for our next leader.
And it's just a regular vote? Or do you
It's
debate?
a process. No, we try and keep it as apolitical as possible, but to make it
So
very
there's no
much
debates
be,
because I'd
no,
be the best
right.
because of these reasons, right? I would make this
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
It's not about that.
It's not about that. It's looking at perhaps the sister's experience, or the good thing is we know one another, so it's not as if, well, we don't know what her ideas about this might be. We're as a congregation, as often as we can be, in dialogue with one another, sort of discovering and discerning life's calling together. There's a great idea about religious life that I heard, this idea that we care for one another's vocation. So essentially I'm as much concerned about my being the best IHM I can be as I am about other people,
Right.
other sisters.
It's not competitive.
It's not competitive, right. So we look for ways that we can help one another grow, how we can help ourselves to grow. You had asked what our mission was. Succinctly, I would say our mission is to be a prophetic witness to God's unconditional love in the world. That's the language that we like to say. So it's this idea of God's presence is here, and we're sort of called to witness to that. It's here in all of creation, in humanity, and in the natural environment.
Yeah, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how I would define God, but I mean, I don't think anybody can distinctly.
Right.
I mean, love is the first word that comes to mind
Sure.
for me. But yeah, I would say that and that positive goodness, whatever you want to call it, is in everything.
Right.
I don't know if it always is nurtured.
Right, and that's, I guess, part of what our challenge is at this time, to try and call that out for people. Yeah.
So it makes sense that you would be involved with an organization called Friends of the Poor.
Right.
It totally makes sense that an IHM sister would have founded the Friends of the Poor. And it also makes sense that IHM sisters would start a university. That also goes along with the mission, because I guess you believe education is empowerment.
Sure, education is so vital, and I think in these United States we've taken for granted the idea of a free education, but when you consider that in all places in the world that's still not available to people. But there was a time here in northeastern Pennsylvania when there wasn't a great opportunity, post-secondary education opportunity for young women, and so in 1915 Marywood University was created. The stories of the sisters are quite impressive, because they did some bold undertakings, and we think about that from time to time. We like things to be well researched, and you have to have your strategic plan, and you have to have your 10-year financial projections, and all of the things all the trappings of this day and age. And yet, just with an idea and credentials, the sisters were able to create Marywood College, Marywood Seminary, which today has evolved into Marywood University, with the idea of serving mostly the children, or the young women, the daughters of the coal miners in this region.
And for just until maybe the 1980s, I guess, it was just for women.
Right.
Now it's open, it's
Yeah.
co-ed.
It became coeducational in the classroom in the 70s, and
Oh,
then
70s in the classroom.
but for residential a little bit later.
I guess I was
Yeah.
thinking residential.
Right. And so today, if you drive on Marywood's campus, you see many more male students than you did in the past. And another way that there's evidence of that would be the number of male sports teams that are available. As the population of male students increased, they were able to add more and more sports. So just recently added lacrosse. So lacrosse is a sport with a big team, so you have to have lots of male students in order to have a good team.
I saw them playing in the snow one
Yeah.
day. They cleared off the lacrosse field, snow everywhere, but on the field.
Yeah.
It was pretty neat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that institution is run by an IHM sister, and is that the intent for it to always be that way? I mean, it was founded by IHM sisters. It's predominantly, I guess the administration is predominantly run, at least the president is an IHM sister. Is that the way it just happens to be occurring, or is that the way you want it to be?
I think both. I think it is the way it happens to be, and the choice of the president is a conversation that occurs between the board, a process, interview process that occurs between the board of trustees for Marywood University, and St. Joe Center is another example, and the leadership team, Sister Mary Persico and the members of the leadership team that I mentioned, to identify who might be the best candidate. And up until this time, it has fortunately been an IHM sister, but I don't think that we could know into the future if that would always be the case.
It's not codified that it must be.
Right.
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 Well, what I'm getting at, I guess, and I'm just analyzing the whole, and I don't know everything. One thing I know is the IHM sisters as a whole, I look at the work that they've done in the aggregate, are obviously very intelligent, have a lot of vision, and have strength and perseverance. There's no doubt about that.
Thank you. Those are nice attributes.
Yeah, they're important attributes,
Yeah.
and they are, they're attributes that I think anyone would like to have as their own. When you look at the fact that you're part of the church, the Catholic Church, which, in my view, and this is my own view, maybe it's looked at differently by yourself or other folks, it's more of a paternalistic entity. Does that ever get in the way, so to speak, when you're trying as a predominantly, female organization? There's times where you have to just stop because the paternalism becomes more of a power, an entity that you need to just relent.
Yeah. I see what you're
I'm trying to
talking
say it
about.
without
Yes,
being
I do.
disrespectful.
Yeah, no,
to
I
any-
understand. The women religious, as we call ourselves, Catholic sisters, we certainly are a part of the church.
Yes.
And what people sometimes don't realize is we are part of the laity of the church. We are not part of the hierarchical church. A lot of times in the past, perhaps there was an association with the sisters when there was more of a separation of the sisters from the laity. Sat in separate places in the church.
And excuse me, when you say laity, you're talking about just everyday folk that
Right,
come into the
all
church.
the baptized of the church.
All the baptized of
Yeah,
the church.
Yeah. So we're part of the laity. We are not part of the hierarchy, and that group is typically would just be called those who are ordained, and from there as they are elevated to different responsibilities within the church. And so when I mentioned our charism and our mission to be a prophetic witness, women religious, we do see our responsibility to be prophetic within the church, to sometimes take risks. It's important to remember that the church is a living organization. It's organic, it's dynamic, and so it's moving. And so sometimes the prophets, and I don't mean to say all sisters are prophets or the only prophets are sisters. There are many prophets within the church, people who help lead it perhaps to where it may be going. And so sometimes when you're in that position where you're different or ahead of or just different from what the whole is saying in a prophetic role, sometimes there's risk. Always there's risk involved with that. And the
Because
good
it's
thing about
it's provocative.
right, and in time sometimes people come together. You know, there may be a prophet who is moving out, and yet in time, people are more in agreement on an issue or something.
When you say moving out, you mean not with the majority?
Right. Yeah, moving. I mean, when you think of our own time, I know we were growing up around the same time.
Yeah, I think we're about the same age.
Yeah, there weren't. This is a simple example. There weren't female altar servers.
No.
Okay, wasn't accepted. Probably there was a sister or a renegade priest who said to a young girl one time, "You can be an altar server," and so so began the change. Simple example, and yet that's how change happens. And so I think there are people within the church who are helping to move it and helping to change where change needs to happen. And there's also the prophetic role, which is to stay the course, you know, to be a traditional person. And so you sort of see a great mix. The great thing about
all sisters aren't the same.
exactly, and I was just going to get on that point. The great thing about being part of a congregation, you know, sometimes are you from a conservative? Are you from a more liberal? Well, the truth is a lot of times just like a family, in the sense that there are many families in which you have a lot of diversity. In more interesting families, you have diversity of opinion, I think, within a family.
And that's allowed.
Right, exactly. So the same would be true within the congregation. Because of age, because of experience, because of personal experience or your upbringing, your education, there would be great variety among what some sisters think.
So you don't, as with any person as part of any group, you don't represent everybody.
No. And a lot of times people say,
that
well,
group.
what do the young sisters think? And I say, I could only speak for myself.
Right.
You know,
Right.
that happens a lot of times.
Is there a point, though, where there might be, and this is probably a yes and no response, where there'd be a priest who would say, listen, sister, with all due respect, you're way out of your league right now. You're
Right.
way out of where you're supposed to be.
Yes.
And then do you have to just say, okay?
I think so, and that would obviously be the sister's individual choice in how to respond to that kind of reaction from a priest. I haven't had that personal experience, but I think a sister would determine. Our vow of obedience that we do make, we make obviously to the congregation as a whole and to the president, but obviously all Christians are invited. We vow poverty, chastity, and obedience, and all Christians are invited, I think, in likeness of Jesus, to also be advocates, be in alignment with that idea.
But it's to a higher
Correct.
power, not
Yes.
to necessarily a human
Correct.
that
Yeah.
the obedience is.
Yeah.
Well, and the organization.
Mm-hmm.
It's an entity larger than yourself.
Right. But we are also public witnesses to the church. And, you know,
That's
we're
interesting, a public witness. to
public witness to the church. There is, at this time, the church is, you have a newspaper here in the headlines quite a bit, often for controversy and for unfortunate, you know, and I don't want to be light about that, but for sins of the past and perhaps sins of the present. And that's a reminder, too, of the humanity of the church and its leaders. There's also tremendous power and tremendous blessings that have occurred because of the church. I mean, if you look at our community, you look at many communities, the things that, I'll say Catholic churches, but then I'll extend it to say that faith communities are doing, you know, both of the homeless shelters in Scranton, one run by Bethlehem, one run by Catholic Social Services. So two faith-based organizations.
Both Christian, one Methodist,
right.
one
Yeah.
Catholic.
Are providing the only homeless shelters that we have in Scranton. So there's a lot to be said for what has been accomplished and the good that the Catholic Church and its ministers continue to do in people's lives.
Yeah, I think that's for certain. And every organization as big and as powerful as the Catholic Church is going to have all kinds of things going on, good
Sure.
and bad,
Yeah.
and all kinds of people involved. But this is my own personal take. I think part of what's going on with the media and other groups when it comes to pointing out some of the problems in the Catholic Church has a bit to do, this is based on my own reading, with the aggressive role that the upper echelon of the hierarchy has taken when it comes to politics. And I think some of these groups that want to point out the problems in the church were upset with that role that they took on. You know, vote for this person because of this reason, or don't vote for this person because of that other reason. I think a lot of folks were like, wait, you're not supposed to be doing that.
Right.
And you have a lot of influence over people. People are just going to obey almost because they have such faith in your position.
Right.
And you know, the fact that you're associated with their God. So I think this is sort of the fallout in a way. And I'm not saying it's not justified, because some of these things are heinous. But
Sure.
as you said, there are all kinds of good and bad things going on.
Right.
But we're looking now at a lot of bad things in the
Yeah.
media.
And it's important to remember, by definition, the church is the people of God. And so we need to keep that in mind as far as our sense of responsibility and participation in helping to create the church. And to, as I said, it being an organic and a dynamic organization, to continue to participate, because I hear things from people, you know, with the reorganization in our diocese, a necessary thing, that sometimes people have said, well, that's it, I'm giving up. Well, your faith should not be so easily given over and given up. You know, find the right parish for you and your family. If it's, you know, I do believe that having a spirituality, being part of an organized religion is very helpful for people. It helps to make sense of a lot of things that are otherwise challenging, and things that can just lead to a sense of hopelessness.
Yeah.
Yes, but faith and organized religion are a great way for us to understand our lives and the mystery of life.
I have this conversation with my mother all the time, because my mother is a pretty devout Catholic, but she's also an open individual, so we have a lot of heated discussions. As of late, I'm not as religious as I was once. You know, I was an altar boy and all that. I'm very spiritual though, and I always say to my mother, "Ma, I don't really need an organized religion to feel spiritual. And I believe in spirituality, and I respect the fact that you get something from religion. I'm not downplaying the fact that you are connected to a religion. So we coexist in that way. She always wants me to go to church more and all that, and and I have children now.
She's saying prayers that you'll give.
She is saying prayers, no doubt. Rosary, everything, I'm sure. But
For your soul.
yeah, she is, and I respect that, and I feel bad in a way because she's worried
Yeah.
that I'm not going. But that's one of the problems I have. I mean, again, going back to a higher power, a power that's better than human beings, I don't think you'd be punished for not going into a building.
Right.
As long as you're a good person and you're living a righteous life.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to be punished.
Well, we all trust in a non-judging God, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
That exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But oftentimes that's not the message you get from certain factions.
Sure.
And so that's one of the problems I have. And I think a lot of my peers have that problem too.
Yeah.
And they don't have the sort of faith or even the insight that you do about the church. We don't see it the way you do. People that are like me.
Yeah. I always think about organizations that change comes from within as much as from external forces. And so people have often said, you know, how do you stay within a church that falls? But for a number of reasons, some that I've already mentioned, but that idea that I can participate in the future of the church as much as I'm participating in the presence. If I step out of it, I can't.
I don't know if you remember Sister Luce.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
She and I used to speak a lot. She really broadened my understanding and respect about many facets of the church. And she used to say that exact thing. You know, it's organic and it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like something about it, then you have a responsibility and you have the option to try to do something from within.
Right.
You don't have to walk away.
And you may not live to see that change. You know, there's a great poem by Romero, Oscar Romero, who was martyred in El Salvador, where he talks a lot about, you know, helping to design a future that is not your own. You know, women who wanted to be altar servers in the 50s and forward, you know, would they have lived long enough to see young women up there participating in that ministry of the church? Again, just a simple example, and yet one that shows what sometimes isn't permitted at one point can be at a later
Right,
date.
and maybe you had something to do with it changing in the future.
Right.
And when you were saying that, that bounces me to that last speech that Dr. King gave when he was saying, I might not be there when it occurs, but it's going to happen.
Yes.
And I think a lot of things that exist in a good way today in our society has to do with a lot of the work that he and his colleagues started.
Yes.
You know. Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot, by the way. This is Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. I'm Lawrence Pugliese, and it's nice to have you with us.
Thank you.
We're talking about all kinds of stuff that I think is important. I mean, northeastern Pennsylvania is a very spiritual part of the world. Whether you're a Christian or a Jew or you're Muslim or you're, I don't know.
You're a fan of The Office.
You're a fan of The Office. You're spiritual about that. Yeah, we're very spiritual here. I'm a fan of The Office, by the way. How about you, Joe?
I am a fan of The Office.
When we were talking a moment ago, and when I used to have these conversations with Sister Luce, and she would say, just get involved. You know, those things you think need to be addressed, address them.
Right.
I hear that, but I don't feel like it's easy to do. I don't see myself going into the church and saying, excuse me, Pastor, I have a real issue with this, and then I'm going to be heard, or that it'll be embraced.
Right. Well, I think we have to remember, too, that it's not a perfect organization, because, and what really is, you know, there's a sense that, well, if the mass schedule doesn't match my schedule because, you know, soccer practice or basketball practice gets in the way, then I give up church, you know. I think we have to remember that it does demand, any organization you belong to as a member, there's compromises, and there's perhaps your ideal for that organization, and then simply what is. Because it's imperfect, and part of why I think I've learned to accept that is it's helped me to accept the imperfection within myself and within other people. We're all sort of a work in progress. And so to expect to be, you know, people are highly critical. I feel our brother priests, many of them, the majority of the priests that I know, are humble servants. And they see their role very much to pastor the people entrusted to them. And they give of their whole selves, you know, all their time. And yet they'll be, you know, I knew a priest, and he told me, I once left the church supper to go to the prayer service at the nursing home. Both places were mad at me that I, you know, had to leave one to go to the other. So it's that kind of thing. What are our expectations of priests? Are they realistic? And are we giving them the benefit of the doubt and our support and encouragement? Because anybody who's leading a nonprofit at this time, there are great financial challenges for all nonprofits, all types of industries, but particularly nonprofits. And one that's going through a tremendous amount of change that's caused by population change, the aging population and fewer people, and then also the cultural things that are starting, the population shifts that are starting to occur. So they're very challenged, and then they themselves are also part of an organization that's ancient and ever new. So trying to create a balance between the tradition and international. You know, some of the issues, and as you said, some of what the heat that's come to the Catholic Church is specifically coming to the Catholic Church in the United States because of its activity with political issues that are happening in the United States. But in other parts of the world, the population in the Catholic Church is growing. The population in among Catholic sisters is growing.
In the developing world,
In
mainly?
the developing world, right, because they're just sort of coming into that whole idea, as you say, about the growth of the church and the institutional church. So that's part of, I think, what the crunch is for sometimes American Catholics is our American style of, I want it to change, I want it to meet my needs. And in fact, it is an international organization and one that therefore has to address the needs and stick with the needs of all people throughout the world.
Well, that's a huge undertaking. And I think one of the things that doesn't resonate for most is that we're truly a part of an organization.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that resonates. I think it's more, you have to do this. If you don't, like my mother, you have to do this.
Yeah.
My mother, I think it's given her a lot of strength over the years. So not for her, but for me, the message I hear from her, you have to do this.
Yeah.
If you don't do this, it's wrong. So when people are telling you that, and then you get a little education, and you start feeling empowered, and then you start seeing political things occur, and they just look human, not superhuman, you start saying, well, should I really waste, quote unquote, my time with this? If the message resonated that this is yours too, and I really want to hear what you think, and I want you to be part of the spiritual growth, I think more people would, and there are people in the church who feel that, but I don't think a majority of people, and I'm going on a limb saying this, feel that. I think a majority of people today, in these parts at least, go to church because they feel they have to.
Yeah, that they're not drawing anything from it.
I think they feel they have to.
Yeah.
It's like a better safe than sorry, and also it's traditional. You know, I do this because my mother did this, my father did this, and that's nice, but that shouldn't be the only motivation because that's sort of empty.
Sure.
It can't just be empty going through the motions. You have to be spiritually and soulfully. I don't know if there's a difference. I always wonder, spiritual and soul.
Yeah.
I look at them as separate. And in your heart, you have to be really, really connected to it. And I don't know that that's going on so much. That's why people are leaving.
Well, and I think, even the people who go because they feel they have to, I think God can still work with that. So sometimes
It's better than nothing?
Well, yeah, or you're still working at that relationship.
Okay, gotcha.
Church is a way for us to strengthen our relationship with God. Prayer is a time to communicate with God. So there's lots of, great opportunities for us to do that. And one is certainly not going to church, not being in a church in order to pray or to worship, God. There's lots of wonderful opportunities for us to do that. When you were talking before about what's going on in the developing world, one of the best things a parish can do is either send people to an international mission, a Catholic mission, or to travel or to sort of adopt a mission in a foreign country, because then you get a sense of that idea of a worldwide organization. I had a chance on a few occasions to be in Guatemala, and it started with a service trip sponsored by Marywood University and the presence of one of our IHM sisters who's ministered there, to see what the Catholic Church has been able to help, how that church has helped a diocese in Minnesota, helped a community there to really flourish. To bring people out of poverty through
a diocese in Minnesota
helping
was directly linked to this.
Yeah, St. Lucas Parish in Guatemala, and it's just tremendous. So it brings you out, it brings you into that global, which is really God's concern, and I think it helps us to move away from our own disappointments or inconveniences, to really recognize that the Catholic Church is a global organization of service.
Of service, and that when I've over the years studied and tried to understand the Catholic Church, because again, it's a huge influence on my life, whether I like it or not. It is.
Yeah.
I see that there are a couple of factions. There's maybe more, maybe several, but there's a faction that looks at Jesus Christ as being a missionary, basically, and more social justice. And there's another faction that believes, no, that's not what it's about. It's about ethics and morality and things of that nature. Almost philosophical more than action.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're more of an expert, obviously, than I am. I don't know if I'm speaking accurately about those factions or not.
I think you're on target there. I think you can look, you know, there's some who perceive God as, and there was a time that, you know, God was defined as king or God as judge. And again, I think those of us who were educated in the latter half of last century forward, you said it as we began our conversation, we shifted our understanding of God to God as love. God is love. And so that's a very different. So you have, within the Catholic Church, you talk about it being global, well, it's very intergenerational. So you have lots of people, again, because of personal experience, because of education, because of familiarity with God, or hardship that has occurred in their life, or blessing that has occurred in their life, to have their own perspective or interpretation. And I think it's wonderfully exciting when it comes together and it all gets mixed up, and yet you can say, you know, we still believe, you know, we're still together in this, and we still believe in this together. Because none of us can, as you said, none of us can fully know God. God is expansive, and so we all bring to that conversation a little bit of truth. And perhaps it's only, you know, my truth or my understanding of it, but when I bring it to the whole, and that's why I love being part of a religious congregation, because we get invited to do that all the time. And the outcome becomes what we all believe in. You know, we're a group of approximately 500 women, and we have 5 core values. That was challenging to come to. You know, everybody had the word they wanted to hang on to, and yet we agreed upon 5, you know, that would serve as our core values.
And that occurred back in...
Not too long ago, no.
Oh, okay.
I've been in the community 16 years, and so it's been in the last, I'd say, 10 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And that they only apply to the Scranton
That's right.
branch
Yeah.
of the IHM Sisters.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
It sounds like a very sort of stimulating, to say the least, organization, intellectually and spiritually stimulating. It really does.
It is, and you know, sometimes, again, we just get kind of remembered for the work that we do. We are also...
Well, that's actualizing everything that it is.
How we get there,
Yeah.
right, in our presence to one another.
That to me, I don't know how anyone could fault.
Mm-hmm.
That's important, and it's very human. You know, whether you're religious or not, human in the best sense
Mm-hmm.
of the word. It's when you get to the upper echelon sometimes of any large organization, I think you're dealing with power players. I don't care what they represent.
Mm-hmm.
And power players do some interesting things on occasion. And I also think when you talk about generational, right now the church is run by folks that are not from our generation.
Mm-hmm. Right, very true.
So that we might, I'm not going to speak for you, I know I do have a sort of disconnect with a lot of the attitudes.
Right. And sometimes you and I can make choices that really only impact our lives, you know, your family, my ministry, my group of friends. But when you look at the leadership of the whole church, their decision making is slowed down because they have to assess its impact for the church globally. And so when you're thinking in that large scale, you know, sometimes we think, oh, this organization should change more rapidly, but it has to consider how that would impact Catholics all over the world. And not only Catholics, because obviously the Catholic Church's choices impact others as well. You know, we live in an interdependent world.
Yeah.
You know, this show is Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. When I think of that whole concept, and Sister Margaret Gannon, a professor at Marywood University,
she's wonderful. Yeah.
Great friend of mine, she introduced that whole idea to me. She didn't introduce it to the world, but that whole idea of our interdependence, you know, and living together in an interdependent world and living responsibly. That's she created when she was the dean. That was the theme of the core curriculum: living responsibly in an interdependent world. So
You have to reflect on that.
the choices each of us makes impacts, sometimes just on a small scale, but when you think of that, raise it up to the macro level. It's kind of exciting, awe-inspiring, daunting.
For certain.
Yeah.
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 Wow, I don't even know what time it is anymore. We've been talking about a lot of really, to me, interesting ideas and questions. I'm constantly reflecting on these things. It's nice to have you at the table here to
Thank you.
share these questions with.
Yeah.
Anthony, how long have we been going now? 45 minutes? All right.
Okay.
Anthony just gave me the international symbol for 45
minutes.
Anthony George, our technical director here on ECTV. Thank you, Anthony, for being here. And Sister Mary Alice Jacquinot at the table. I'm Lawrence Pugliese, and we're going to, for a moment, take a little break, and I want to announce some award winners. We're talking about community service, and I think this is a good opportunity, if I can find that sheet of paper. United Cultures Leadership Institute, as I mentioned, sponsors this program, underwrites it, and it's part of Lackawanna. Well, it's at Lackawanna College. Not really sure the relationship other than that. The folks there give us a lot of support, I'll tell you that much. And UCLI this year organized some leadership awards via our cadets through the United Cultures Leadership Academy. And we also have college students at Lackawanna College who advise us. They're called the Student Advisory Group. And we have an advisory board. Sister Mary Alice is one of those advisors, and we have, about 10 others. And this whole group together decided what to name these awards and who to nominate for these awards and who actually were the recipients, who became the recipients of these awards. We have 10 awards. I want to list them now and the recipients. The 2010 United Cultures Leadership Institute Barak recipients. Courage and Leadership went to Captain Chesley Sullenberg, the pilot, if you recall, who landed his aircraft in the Hudson River. The Integrity and Leadership Award went to Captain William Springer of the Dunmore Police Department. The Creativity and Leadership Award went to Paula Rocan-Macare, the president of Happenings magazine. Vision and Leadership went to Amy Smith, an MIT engineer and inventor. Wisdom and Leadership went to President Barack Obama, the President of the United States. Humility and Leadership went to Simone Wang, the director of Safety Net, which is an organization in northeastern Pennsylvania that serves the poor. The Leadership Through Art Award went to Youth Arts Project. It's a national program based in New York and Washington, D.C. that focuses on assisting at-risk youth through the arts. Leadership Through Journalism, Chris Kelly, op-ed journalist with the Scranton Times. The Great Expectations for Leadership, Bishop-elect Bombera, the soon-to-be installed, or has he been installed?
No, end of April.
End of April, sorry. Soon-to-be installed Bishop for the Catholic Diocese of Scranton. And finally, the Leadership as a Life's Work Award went to Sister Adrienne Barrett, the founder and retired executive director of the Friends of the Poor. Their awards will be given to them on May 8th at a reception that will be held at Lackawanna College. Congratulations, 2010 UCLI Barak Award winners. And
I could tell you I spoke with Sister Adrienne shortly after she received the letter.
Oh,
and
did you?
She was honored and thrilled.
Was she?
Yes, absolutely.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, she really was.
I'm enamored by her.
Yeah.
I really am. I think she's wonderful.
She is a great person. It's really an honor for me to follow her in this ministry, the ministry that she founded.
Friends of the Poor.
Yeah, we think of a lot of organizations that have been around for a long time, so you don't always get a chance to know who got this great work started, but I do get that. We all get that opportunity. She's much beloved. I have people all the time who say, I just moved to the area, but I heard about this woman, Sister Adrienne Barrett. So her reputation is wide and far, and she really is a person who has at her heart the concern for the poor. And not just mostly economically poor, but poor in other ways, poor in a sense of social placement, poor in a sense of perhaps being left out or excluded, poor in the sense of loneliness, and I think that's why she created, and we continue a lot of our outreach to the elderly for the ways that they may feel that they're starting to be forgotten by society. So Many of the things she started, I've continued, and that's really been a lot of fun. It's a great ministry.
Well, that's where I wanted to go next. I mean, you are the new executive director. Has it been a year?
It's been a full year.
A full year.
I
And
started January 2009.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
In that year, some of the things you've become aware of, some of the plans you have for the future?
Sure.
Would you like to share?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Well, I would say in the first year it was simply to experience each event. Friends of the Poor has a number of daily activities. We do sponsor a food pantry in 2 locations, West Scranton and South Scranton. And we also receive and handle and distribute donated items, furniture, household furnishings, kitchen appliances, and clothing. So day to day, we're busy with that. And then probably we're as well known for our big community events, because obviously that's when you get some extra media coverage. But we do food distribution 3 times per year. It includes Easter and Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that ranges typically around 1,200 families or households we help.
Wow.
And then the Thanksgiving program, which is really family to family, run by Dr. Jim and Mary Lou Burney. That went up around 3,000 families this year, so that was a huge, huge undertaking. And then we also in the summer do day trips for children, all children from low income, many from public housing who may not have any experience of a summer vacation. And so even our field trips, our one-day excursions, they're meant to be educational and recreational, and we make sure everybody has a good lunch and a good dinner. So it's kind of a great day away. If not, a full vacation, at least it's a great day away.
Yeah, one day out of town is nice.
That's right, absolutely. And then other activities that we have a St. Patrick's Day dinner, we have for senior citizens, we have a Christmas dinner for senior citizens, and a Martin Luther King program. And throughout the year, I guess what I've learned, I'm more convinced than ever that we live in a great community. It wasn't new learning, but it certainly was confirmed that people here are very generous, and they care about their neighbor. And I get to often be at the point where those two meet. The idea of Friends of the Poor, when Adrian created it and named it, I think the emphasis really needs to be on the friendship and that idea of friends and mutuality. And it's the idea that some people have a desire to give and other people are in need of receiving. And you can't do one without the other.
So you make that connection.
Correct. And it's really very powerful. And so this whole year my eyes have been wide open. My heart's been wide open, because you go in a day may experience something that's very heartbreaking in someone sharing a part of their life that's very painful. And there's also those wonderful experiences that are heartwarming when it's somebody's generosity and caring. And it's not only the most affluent and the corporate giving and the business places, it's people with very little who are giving. I always say our donations range from $1 to $1,000, and that's very true, because we get in an envelope someone who sincerely says, "This is what I can afford. Please share it with someone else." And so there's a lot of beautiful generosity in our community, and I'm privileged to be able to witness it and to see it come together.
Is there any contact information if someone wanted to
Sure,
get more information?
Sure.
What have you?
Friends of the Poor, my office is located at Jackson Terrace. We have a great and long-standing relationship with Scranton Housing Authority. They provide us with workspace, and so we're able to be present where people are. So our phone number there is 570-348-4428, and people can visit us if they have donations or if they're in need of something. Again, at Jackson Terrace, which is the intersection of Jackson Street and Meridian Avenue in West Scranton.
And that number one more time?
570-348-4428.
Okay.
We don't have a website. You talked about long-range plans. That would be one of them.
It's not that hard anymore.
I know. That's the thing. It's just...
you got to get one savvy kid.
Right, exactly.
Before he gets he knows how much his child is worth.
Trust it to a 13-year-old. Right, exactly, before he starts coming up with an hourly wage. But yeah, that's something I definitely want to do and continue to work. I've had great opportunities in the past year to work with students from Marywood University and University of Scranton and the local high schools and other organizations, people who want to come together as an organization and volunteer. And that's been wonderful. So I'd like to see that continue.
Now, I know we don't have a lot of time, but you wanted to mention something about the Smithsonian.
I did.
Do you want to?
Sure.
Do you think you could do that succinctly?
Sure, I can do that very succinctly. Okay. The Leadership Conference for Women Religious, which is based in Silver Spring, Maryland, and sort of acts as a connector of all Catholic sisters, or many Catholic sisters in the United States. They started a few years ago to work toward doing an exhibit with the hopes that it would potentially end up at the Smithsonian, and in fact it is traveling the United States for 3 years. It's currently at the Smithsonian, and it's called Women in Spirit, Catholic Sisters and the Making of America. Wow. So it really goes back to the 1700s and looks at the contributions that women religious have made in the making of the United States. And you can't look at the healthcare system or the education system in the United States without looking at the contributions of Catholic sisters. In some places in the Midwest, there was Catholic education before there was the provision for public education. In the South, there were Catholic schools available for persons of color by the Catholic organization before there were public schools. So it's really a great testament. And I mentioned it to you. I had the great privilege of being included in that exhibit.
I'm proud to know that.
Thank you. There's a little piece at the end where sisters who are living the life of Catholic sisters today get to speak, and so I'm one of the voices of that. And it's, as I said, currently at the Smithsonian. It's going to travel in the fall to Ellis Island, and it's been, I think, in Dallas, Texas, and in Ohio, and a few other places. So it's a great effort that they were able to pull this together, and it's a great gift to women religious, and I think to other historians and to other people who've been at the end of benefiting from the services of Catholic sisters.
You might, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, and we're empowered and partners with the laity, so it's kind of everyone's story.
It sounds like a wonderful story.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can even access it via the internet, going to the Smithsonian Institute's website. Maybe
I think you can, or through, I think it has its own website at this point, Women in Spirit exhibit, or certainly from the Leadership Conference for Women Religious, their website.
I'll have to check it out. You should check it out too.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're getting up to the time where we have to say until next time.
Okay.
Now, this is called Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. And I asked you before the show if you had any recipe, whether it be, a nice lasagna or, whatever you like. I know you have a couple ethnicities that are part of your history, right? I'm
Irish and Italian.
Right.
You're French last name, so that's another show.
Yeah, that is another show. So I don't know if you had something of that nature or a recipe for life.
Sure. Well, I go to bridal showers sometimes, and when you have to bring a recipe card, I usually write out on it, when in doubt, order pizza. So I guess I do like to cook. I do find it to be creative and a great way. I like to be prepared in my mind. And I don't follow recipes so much as I just kind of wing it and think what might taste good. But I was going to share wisdom, I guess, and it's become a great recipe for me in doing the work of Friends of the Poor. When I had my initial conversation with Sister Adrienne about my becoming the director of Friends of the Poor, she said, my advice is love the poor and be yourself. And it stays with me because it's such powerful advice in many things that we do, to be yourself. Because had I tried to simply be Adrienne's replacement, I would have failed in the work. I couldn't take it on, in that regard, because people often say you're her replacement. I'm not. She continues to be her wonderful and active self, and there'll only ever be one Sister Adrienne. I'm lucky to be able to call her my friend and my sister, but that's her message. That was her advice, and I take it to heart. Love the poor and be yourself. So
I love it.
Yeah, it's great, simple.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I think it's really it's heartening for me to know that you're a spiritual, intellectual, and community leader in Northeastern
Thank you.
Pennsylvania, and also a board member of the United
Okay,
Cultures
absolutely.
Leadership Institute. I
Yeah.
love all of that, so
Yeah.
thank you so much for all the
Thank
work you do.
Thank you. I'm grateful to be able to be a guest on your show.
We'll do it again.
All right,
because we
sounds
just started
good.
scratching the surface today. All right, folks, that's another episode of United Cultures Leadership Institute sponsored program, Stories, Wisdom, and Recipes. I hope we helped enlighten maybe a little bit, or we helped you pass the time, maybe entertained you as well. And I have a little something else to end the program with. Until next time, enjoy the spring. This is called Genuine Love. Tranquilizers and nebulizers and cotton gins brought back from antiquity by my third cousin Slim, and lost puppy dog tails with kumquat snails atop grinning birdhouse shanty dweller. He carouses deep in the cellar, next to the furnace, and the lamp isn't even plugged in. It seems bigger than usual. Magazines and newspaper strewn in patterns of random chaos with dynamic designs of multicolored shifts, ebb and flow, propelled by the laser, razor, taser, dynamo you just might call human life, people's strife and inconsequential whim. Again, it's that third cousin Slim living here by the seat of his borrowed pants, making up inspired chants and heavy-winded winged dance and revamps toward thoughtful musings and verve. Verve is the word, my sweet. Verve is the word I at this very moment am feeling. It leaves me reeling because of the potential, but I will soon need more than just the potential. We need the kinetic, the phonetic, the non-superfluous glory and wisdom of living genuine love.